So this is a session about contract cheating and academic integrity. We're going to introduce, as I say, very briefly what that topic entails for us and then what we're trying to do about it and where your input will be really helpful. So first of all, perhaps we should introduce ourselves. We're a team of three facilitating this workshop. So I'm Kristyan and I'll ask my others to introduce them.
I'm academic compliance team. I'm Francine, Watkins, and I'm from Public Health.
Sorry, I'm just lost its flick. Great. So the topic of academic integrity is the hottest topic, perhaps that we come across at the moment. Any week that we could look at in the press, there are constant reports and media messages really around the urgency of us addressing academic integrity. These were just a couple of things that came through the recent media around contract cheating and also about how universities have responsibilities and students have responsibilities that we need to take extremely seriously. So the reason why we are picking this up as a topic that our institution is going to be working on is that we cannot afford to ignore it, to hope it's going to go away, to assume that we're going to get on top of the issues easily. So why this? Why now? Why do we need a project to look at this? One of the key areas is of reputational risk. We recognise within the media institutional risk, both for the sector, but also for individual places and institutions where instances and prevalence of academic misconduct are clear. And we know that freedom of information requests are regularly put out to institutions, and that information is out there about how we are handling academic integrity or misconduct. I think other reasons are clearly about the quality and standards of our awards and the importance really for ethical reasons that we address and that we don't just push under the carpet what is a serious issue for us. The availability of online technology resources, but also in particular online sources of support or of support for student writing through the use of essay mills is very, very clear and prevalent. Again, something that we in Liverpool recognise as being real, and also something that is actually not going to be going away. The increased pressure on students, again recognising, and our talk refers to the tipping point, recognising the point at which academic integrity is compromised for our students, and understanding what the context for the student is coming into an institution, both in terms of their previous experience of learning, their previous background in terms of, for example, language and cultural assumptions about academic learning, and also about their expectations about what studying is at university. So recognising really why this is happening and alleviating to some extent, or at least recognising what we might be able to do to alleviate the pressure as part of the problem that we find ourselves within. One of the key concerns is that it's very difficult for students and for staff to understand, for us to have a grip on what that boundary is between legitimate support for students tipping into unfair practice, and understanding what is actually quite a difficult thing to separate and to differentiate and to make clear in policy terms what we mean by what is integrity and what is misconduct. And that really leads us to the need for us to look at the broader context in which learning takes place, the culture of learning and assessment, and of our role really in ensuring that our assessment practices are clear, are fair, and consistent decisions are being made around assessment. I think this, to sum up really, we recognise and institutionally we're trying to address the fact that this is not just a problem about students and of students making, that it's something that we have shared ownership of, and that requires us to look at our own university practice and our processes, and that's the kind of thing that we want to address in the project. So very briefly, we are one of a number of institutions, Russell Group institutions, which have been brought together to talk about our own practices and to exchange good practice. This is a QAA non-funded project, very sneaky. There's no budget for this, but it's a prompt to us to say what are we doing and how are we going to be working together as a sector, but also institutionally, individually, to really look at our own practice and what we could be doing better to address things. So hopefully some outcomes from that project, the QAA project, at the end of this calendar year will be to provide some sector guidance. But importantly for us, it's an opportunity to prompt us into some actions, a call for action for us to be reflecting and improving and working in a number of areas. And Francine is going to pick up now with us three strands that we're, through this project, attempting to address for our own institution, around policy and process, around our communication and understanding about academic integrity, and about our curricular issues, particularly around the design of assessment. So I'll pass on to you.
So one of the areas, is that the first one? Yeah. So one of the first areas that we really obviously need to be very clear about is our policy and our processes that we have at the university fit for practice, and do they assist with our academic integrity detection issues. One of the things that we had in the discussions that we had with other institutions is obviously the range of ways in which different institutions deal with academic integrity and the different levels within a university that we deal with it. But in terms of our policy, we've been asking questions of various different groups within the university about whether our policy definitions are clear and transparent, and whether we also have enough information that in the policy around contested authorship as well. Some contract cheating is often quite clear that it's the use of essay mills, but also are we going into the grey area of contested authorship where you get unauthorised help with assessments from family members, from friends, and it tips over into collusion. We also were thinking about the people that we have in place in order to help us with the academic integrity processes. Do we have assessment officers? Do we need an AI officer role? Some schools and departments in the university do have an AI officer, but not all. So there's a lack of consistency sometimes across the roles. Are we safeguarded against the inconsistencies that we're seeing? And how do we oversee and report and act on the data related to AI? One of the big issues is we've got no central data at the moment about how many cases of different levels of AI we've got across the university. A number of the institutions, when we were talking in the groups, were quite surprised that we tackle AI at a localised level. So at a local level, we tackle all categories of academic integrity within departments or within schools. A number of the institutions will not have faculty level panels, for example, to tackle anything our equivalent of C and above. They were surprised that all departments deal with that on that level. Is that something we should be thinking about doing? And they also always have student representation on those panels. And do we have student representation in our processes enough? And Warwick in particular, we're talking about having a policy specifically on proofreading, and where the grey line is in proofreading between proofreading and then contributing to that assessment. And do we need a policy on that? We've also, one of the themes is around communication. What do we do with the information about misconduct? Do we have a system which is too heavily laden towards penalties rather than educating students in not to do it? What do we do with the information about misconduct? Do we share good practice in how we deal with it, how we educate about it? How are we approaching AI with students? Is it, as I was saying, is it always saying, don't do this, don't do that? Or are we actually engaging with them to understand why they do it, hence why we called it, where is the tipping point? When does that student decide to have a academic integrity case rather than just submitting the assessment? The risk of failure is often quite great for some of our students. We found that in the discussions with students, they're actually often stricter and harsher than staff in how they view academic integrity and contract cheating. They see it as, we want them to understand that actually the reputational risk impacts on their degree and therefore their employability. Again, there's that line between legitimate support and misconduct. Are we signposting students to enough support at different stages within that policy? And how are we informing and educating staff about academic integrity? Do we need to have more cross-faculty sharing forums, etc.? And we also then think inevitably AI links in with assessment and curriculum design. Oh, thank you. Right, okay. What was I supposed to do then? I was supposed to stop?
No.
I've got 5 minutes. All right, sorry. I can't remember what you said. So obviously how we design assessments in particular around the curriculum has an impact on whether we then see high levels of plagiarism. We have this concept of authentic assessment. Does that help us then design out potential academic integrity, or is it actually making it worse? Can we use formative assessment better to help us with the understanding where academic integrity can come into assessments? Do the strategies we have add to it? Is there a clustering of assessments in the academic year which puts the pressure on students to then think, the only way I'm going to get through this is if I get some unauthorised support? So where do we need to put those different support systems? Do we do too much up front at the beginning of the year in telling them about academic integrity, but then not follow through the rest of the year? And again, how does the information that we have on breaches, which we don't actually have at a central level, but do we have it at school level, then feed into curriculum design and curriculum change? So these are all the main 3 themes that we've been looking at across the project. And thinking about. But what we really want to know is what the practice is like across the university. So we've got a steering group who's helping us with the project. But I think from that we found that there was quite a lot of practice across the university that we're not really, there's not a lot of consistency. The policy is consistent, but how it's being implemented, there are some areas where we see it operating slightly differently. So we do want to get an idea of how that's operating. In particular, reference to contract cheating as well, because that is something that we're finding more and more, but we haven't got any records of how prevalent it is across the university.